I've been watching too much NFL stuff. We're gonna do like a mock lobby visit where we're actually going to get some practice and build some skills so that this year as we start to advocate on these different bills, we're familiar with the process and know how to do it. But before getting too deep into the training, I'm going to go ahead and pass it to some of the folks who are going to be helping to facilitate this training and webinar. And I'll first go ahead and pass it to my brother Lawrence to introduce himself really quickly, and then Lawrence, you could pass it on to the next person.
Hey everybody, my name is Lawrence. I'm a regional advocacy and organizing associate with LSPC for all of us in that, and I'm going to pass it to and also interim CFU coordinator. And I am going to pass it to Portia.
Thank you, Lawrence. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Portia Taylor. I'm the founder and executive director of Prison from the Inside Out. My org runs programs across the state, and I am super excited to be here with you all tonight. I'm going to pass it over to my sis, Christina.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Christina Brown Mendoza, and I'm with the Place for Grace, the Felony Murder Elimination Project, and many other organizations. Thank you so much for coming in here and joining us tonight. We look forward to sharing space with you and going over all these bills. I'm also going to pass it over to Ms. Sandra Suarez.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sandra Suarez, Executive Director and founder of Jesse's Place Organization. Pronouns are she, her, and ella. Welcome to this legislative training. I will pass it over to Danny. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Danny Gray. I am part of the Power in Unity Fellowship, but I'm also an SC Justice Sister. I'm part of the Fuel as well organizers and some other nonprofits as well. So I'm happy to be here, and let's get started.
All right, dope. I appreciate it. So that's the team that we got tonight supporting with this training. We got some great folks who got a lot of advocacy experience. So, at any point, if you got a question, throw it in the chat, raise your hand, whatever the case is, and we'll be able to try and provide that support. So like I said, I'm going to first start with, just a quick overview of like the legislative cycle, because, as y'all know, like the storytelling, the understanding the bills and all that stuff is really important, but also having like a basic understanding of what's happening in the legislature is also important because, this is kind of the system that we're going to be trying to engage with in a bit. But after I get done with this, Lawrence will provide some tips on, how to do lobbying and, provide some stuff there, and then we'll kind of move on. So the way that I typically do this presentation, I'm going to share screen really quickly, is basically I'm going to do one really quick rundown of the legislative cycle and, both sides of it. But then what I'm going to do is we're going to move on and kind of go in depth on each step of the process, and the way that I like to break it up is I like to say, like, here's what's happening in the Capitol and here's what needs to be happening in community. So, I just like to give kind of an overview of how the slides are going to work. I'm going to buzz through some of it because I don't want to spend too much time going in depth about it because that's just going to take too much time, but at least want to do a quick overview for the folks who this might be their first year doing any lobbying at all. So, the first thing to note, and hopefully, can y'all see my screen okay? Okay, I got some head nods. So basically, the first step in the legislative cycle, and you can see them right here and onto the left is, a bill gets introduced. We're already a little bit deeper in the legislative cycle. We're actually at the stage where bills have already been referred to committee. But the very first step is a bill gets introduced. If you ever watched that old, I can't remember what the show was, but they used to have a little bill they used to dance around singing and whatnot. And the first thing they always used to talk about is the bill has to get introduced and you have to have an idea. So that's the first step. And once it gets introduced, a bill eventually then gets referred to different committees. And the way that it gets referred is it's basically dependent on the issues that the bill touches. So for example, some of y'all might remember the visitation bill, it's technically considered like a public safety bill. So the first place that it typically gets referred to is the Public Safety Committee. But for other bills that we have, for example, we had a bill in previous years that created community-based alternatives to law enforcement that would get referred to public safety and government organizations. So it just really depends on what the bill touches. But once the bill gets referred, it actually goes to that committee and it has to basically go through a vote. And basically the way that it works, and I should step back and say this, depending on the side that the bill get introduced, it has to go through that house first. So example, if a bill is assembly bill, it basically goes through assembly committees first, and then the Senate, the assembly floor. And once it gets past the assembly floor, it goes to the same exact process on the Senate side. So you'll see here, I don't know if you can see my mouse. Once the bill passes the assembly committee vote, it goes to the assembly floor. And then once it passes, it goes all the way back to the Senate side. And it's kind of the same process. It goes to the Senate committee, hopefully passes there, and then to the Senate floor. And once a bill passes both houses, then it goes to the governor's desk. And there's basically three things that can happen there. The governor signs the bill and it becomes law, hopefully within the next year. The governor can veto the bill, which basically means that, the bill dies. And in the third situation, which rarely ever happens, you could actually overturn a governor's veto, but you have to get 2/3 of the legislature to agree to that. It's a very rare, procedural thing that never really happens because, legislators don't typically want to go against the governor in that way. But that is a third option that, technically can happen. So that's just a kind of a quick overview of the legislature, but I'm actually going to go a little bit more in depth at each process. And I'll skip the policy idea. This is basically, the creation of the idea and some of the things that need to happen to actually get a legislator to champion your bill. But because we're already past that stage, I'm actually going to skip that from now and just kind of get to the pieces that are going to be most relevant. I'm also going to skip the finding the champion stage because, again, all of that's already passed. We're already a little bit late in the game. I typically like to make this because, here's some things you have to take into consideration when finding a champion. That's the people's champ, The Rock. But again, we're past that phase, so I won't spend too much time going through this. But here is sort of the stage that we're in right now. And this is bill introduction. This is basically happening within December and March. All the bills that we're going to be talking about tonight, I believe, have already been introduced. Yeah, they have been introduced. So, this part has already happened, but I'll start here just because I think that it is the most relevant. So typically at this point, once you have your bill idea, it's time to start getting the public aware about it. And sort of what's happening in the Capitol at this point is, the assembly member or the champion that's going to be working on the bill typically does like a press conference, a media advisory, again, to get the public to, be aware about it. And at this point, you really start looking for co-authors internally as well. Basically, who are the other people within the Capitol who are also going to be in support of this bill, right? And that is really important because it's like anything else. The more people that you have in support of it, the better it looks for the bill, the easier it makes it to be able to advance throughout the legislative cycle. And then some of the other things that are really important to be happening at this point is just reviewing and editing the fact sheet. We're actually going to be sharing some fact sheets a little bit later. So this, again, phase has already passed, but still, I think it's good to understand that this is sort of what's happening in all the background to get us to this point. And then some of the things that are happening in community at this point, it's, again, reviewing and editing the fact sheet, researching and developing talking points. We're actually going to talk a little about talking points and the research that is really important for when we start advocating for these bills. And then some of the other things, which actually one of them we're doing right now, is it's really important to start mobilizing community and making them informed about this. So you'll see, I got mobilized the community to attend press conferences and to, attend these sorts of things virtually or in person. And that's kind of what this is right here. It's our opportunity to start informing community about the bill that we're going to be working on. And then lastly, building supporters and coalition. We are doing this to make sure that y'all are aware of it and we start to build, mass support. But we're also reaching out to other organizations to be in support of the bills that we're going to be talking about and doing that sort of thing behind the scenes. So this is the piece that I think is the most important. So I'll spend a little bit more time here. And this is kind of the stuff that we're going to be practicing today. But policy committee. So this is basically the bulk of doing state advocacy work. So sort of what's happening in the Capitol at this point is, like I mentioned earlier, bills are referred to committee depending on the issues that they're touching. Some of the other stuff that's happening internally in the Capitol at this time is, you know, the staffers that we're working with who, you know, are connected to the assembly members or senators, they're typically, you know, getting in contact with other staff, trying to figure out strategic insights that will be helpful to our coalition and helping us build relationships with folks so that, you know, when we have to start negotiating and having additional conversations, we have as much information as possible. You know, the other thing that staffers and what's kind of happening at this point is staffers are trying to keep the coalition in the loop about what's happening in the Capitol, you know, whether it's, you know, if assembly members and senators are not willing to take votes on tough issues this year, like they're sharing that type of information so that the coalition could act appropriately. And then the other thing that staffers are kind of doing at this point is they're bringing back amendments that certain folks might want us to take, language changes, that sort of thing. Now, what's happening in community and coalition is, you know, coalition is often evaluating amendments that might be coming our way, or even having internal conversations around like changes that we need to make to the bill. And one thing to note that's really important is the evaluating amendments can really differ depending on who the champion of the bill is. There are some assembly members and senators who like, they don't care what the coalition thinks about amendments and they just move forward with the bill. And then there's others who listen to exactly what the coalition wants to do. We try to make sure that we pick champions that actually listen to the coalition. And, you know, I think that's a critical piece of doing this work. But then some of the other things that coalition community members should be doing at this time is meeting with committee chairs. So these are essentially the people who oversee the different committees that our bills are going to be going through. And, you know, sort of the people who have power within this committee process is the committee chairs and then the committee consultants. And the consultants are basically the people who are reviewing every single bill that go through the committee and often provide recommendations that chairs listen to. Sometimes they don't, but depending on the committee, there's sort of different relationships there. And then the second piece that, you know, community and coalition is really focused on is getting a vote count. And basically what this looks like is every committee has anywhere between 5 to 7 people on that committee. And before our bill goes up for a vote, it's super important to understand how the people are going to vote on that particular issue. So it's very often that like coalitions, directly impacted people will be setting up those meetings with different staffers, you know, for members who sit on the committees and trying to figure out how they're going to vote. And typically at the end of every single one of those meetings, after we share stories, share data, and do some of the things that we're going to practice in a bit, you always ask, can we count on your member to, you know, provide an aye vote? And if they say, you know, I'm not sure, the second question you always ask them is, well, can I follow up with you next week or when will you have an answer for me? Because you really have to stay on top of these folks and not let them like squirm away, because it's really good to have these types of answers before the bill goes up for a vote, because then again, that allows you to be more strategic and just more thoughtful around how you move in the Capitol. Another piece that could be really important during this time is meeting with opposition. There is some opposition that we don't meet with, and there's some opposition that we do. And the reason why I say that is there's some very unreasonable people out there that no matter how many meetings you do with them, they're not going to provide anything fruitful to the conversation. So in those cases, we don't always meet with them, but sometimes there's other opposition who actually have some good insights that we might not have considered. And it's good to meet with those type of people, because when we go to the committee, we could say, hey, we met with the opposition. You know, we came to agreement on this and they're no longer in opposition. They're going to remain neutral or in the best cases, support the bill. So it's really important to be doing that at this stage in the policy committees. And then there's sort of a couple of different ways that folks can be engaging that are really important. One, letters of support. You can send community letters of support. So like from individuals or, you know, community groups, whatever the case is. But then the second one is organizational letters of support. Both of those are super critical because essentially for every letter of support that is submitted, the committee consultant puts together a bill analysis that shows what the bill does, in many cases, how much it costs, and then it shows who is in support of that bill and who is in opposition. And like one of the things that's important to know is there are so many different bills going through committees, and legislators are not reviewing all of the bills. What they often do is they look at that, bill analysis, and they see like, okay, I kind of get what this does. I see a couple of the groups that I mess with are in support of this. So, I'll give an aye vote. So it's really important to get as much mass support in that process so that, your bill is more likely to get the votes that it needs to pass committee. And then the three other things that are really important is, getting people in person to provide Me Too's. That basically say you go up to the mic, you say, my name is Eric Morrison Smith, and I'm with the Alliance of Boys and Men of Color, and I'm in strong support of this bill. That's just another way of showing mass support for the bills, and is a way of kind of like, putting pressure on people to give an aye vote. And then just the last two things, and some of y'all might be familiar with this, is there is an opportunity in the actual hearings when the bill is going up for a vote to get people to testify. You basically get 2 people to testify in support and 2 people to testify in opposition. And you basically get 4 minutes for for each side. So basically 2 minutes for 2 people in support, 2 minutes each for people who are in opposition. And that's just a great way to like get people to share their personal story about why the bill is important to them, and then also have somebody with more like technical expertise to explain what the bill does to all the different committee members. So the reason why I stayed in this portion right here is because this is like a critical part of the legislative cycle. And it's really this work right here that gets bills to the Assembly and Senate floor, where then everybody will eventually vote on it. And like, again, I won't go too deep into this because it's very similar process right here. But basically, when a bill gets to the floor, you have to start tracking the floor vote. So this is, what's happening in the Capitol. You got to do a vote count. Staff typically supports with that. Again, tracking folks who are in opposition and, kind of liaison with those folks. Another big thing is like, because Assembly members and senators have so many different bills, they don't always have an in-depth knowledge about the bill either. In the best case they do, but that's not always the case. So it's really important to provide talking points to Assembly members and senators. So not only because sometimes they don't have the most in-depth analysis of the bill, but because it's really important to ensure that they are talking about the bill in the way that the coalition wants. And then sort of what's happening in the community, similar stuff. You're doing the mobilization, same type of things that you'd be doing for the committee votes. You're doing a floor vote count, floor alert, which is basically an alert that gets sent out to everybody on the Assembly or Senate that basically says like, our bill is going to be going up for a vote. Here's what it does. Here are the people in support. It's just a really quick touch way to notify people that, your bill is going up for a vote. And it's a good way of also making sure that they're going to be present, because sometimes if, you don't notify folks, they might be busy in another committee, and making sure that people are present for your vote kind of ensures the best opportunity to get your bill passed. And then just a couple of like technical things. Most bills require a majority. So if it's on the Senate side, that means you require 21 votes. And then if you're on the Assembly side, you need 41 votes. The only caveat to that is if you are making a change to like the California Constitution, trying to increase taxes, that sort of thing, you need 2/3 votes. So that'd be 27 in the Senate and 54 in the Assembly. All right, let me see. I feel like I see something in the... Okay, perfect. That's just Porsche saying if you got questions. This is where it gets a little bit simpler. If the bills pass both houses, get to the governor's desk, the main things that you got to be doing on this time is like one, submitting letters of support, both again, individual and organizational letters of support, setting a meeting with the governor and his staff in particular to figure out like, hey, what are you thinking about this bill? Like, are you going to sign it or not? And, sometimes they'll share concerns that you can work to address. And other times, if you meet with them and the temperature is kind of like, I might not, sign this bill, then that's when you really got to start putting pressure through social media. Our governor, he got aspirations. He's trying to get places. So like, media, social media, that type of stuff actually works on getting him to pass bills, especially if you're going to make him look bad, like he ain't digging that. So those types of things are really helpful in this stage. Let me see. Let me see and then I already kind of went over this. The governor ends up having 3 options. He could sign the bill, becomes law. He could veto it, which basically kills the bill, or you can get a veto overturned with 2/3 support from the legislature. One thing I always do like to mention in this training is like, it's actually very normal. It is normal for a bill to get introduced multiple times and die, just because, the Capitol could be sometimes shaky on progressive issues. And like, there have been bills that we have worked on for 10 years before it got passed. And I know we always want it the first time, but like, that's just kind of like the reality of engaging in politics. And I think it's important for folks to understand, because sometimes they advance a bill, it dies that first year and they get discouraged. But like, this is one of those games where you have to be persistent. You got to keep pushing on bills. So, actually one of the bills that we're going to be talking about today is one that we've worked on a couple of times, but, we continue to be resilient and continue advancing because we know that we're going to get it eventually. But I do just like to mention that to folks. So that's essentially the first part of this training. It's just an overview. I typically go through like an entire process one more time with an actual bill, but I feel like I've already been talking too much. It's late, but I'm happy to answer any questions. But if there are none, I'm gonna go ahead and pass it to my brother Lawrence to start to give some tips on how you actually do lobbying before we get into the mock training.
All right, Eric, you covered everything. What more is there for me to cover?
We had a question pop up in the chat.
Can you read it for me?
Absolutely. What were some challenges, problems, and successes in uniting agencies to collaborate on addressing these social issues?
To be brief, I'm pretty sure there are going to be more questions like that. Maybe we should just save that to the end. But don't worry, to be brief, I'll answer that one just because you threw it out there. Some of I wouldn't say it's too. There are a lot of challenges because a lot of us, majority of us, we are system impacted. So we come from an experience that has shaped and motivated our passion to do what we do. So it's sometimes easy to align. I would say the most difficult thing or things to do is just dealing with a large group of individuals who are all strong, have strong personalities, have high opinions, who have various ways of communicating, and learning how to navigate those grounds, learning how to still be personable, learning how to still work and deal with people, even though you may not like them, or you may not like their politics, or you may not agree with everything that comes from them. Being able, some of the biggest challenges comes when being able to keep that common ground and allowing that common ground of what you guys are doing to really be what you focus on, and what you utilize to harness your energy and regain your focus. But we got time for more questions, or we will have more questions. I don't want to kind of throw off the flow of the lobby training. But what we're going to do next, we're going to jump into basically a mock interview. But before, a mock ledge visit. But before I do that, I guess I can give a little bit of information. Usually when we schedule lobby visits, we do it through the portal. Each member office has a section on their website where you can request for a visit. And of course, you can give them information on who your organization or who you are as an individual, what bill or what policy or what information that you want to share with them. Sometimes we not only utilize the portal, so the scheduler can sit there and put us into a time slot that works best for either the member, or sometimes we don't get the member, sometimes we'll get the staffer, which is not always a bad idea, because sometimes we like working with the staffers. We have to remember that sometimes the staffers well, not sometimes, the staffers really runs the member's life, if you ask me. The staffers are really responsible for making sure that everything goes in order. And a lot of times, if you can get the staffer to agree or side with what it is that you guys are dealing with or the policy that you're trying to affect change with, then 9 times out of 10 you can get the member. Sometimes after we do utilize the portal, we will send emails, especially if we've already developed relationships with certain staff within that office. Of course, we will send emails out, requesting that we'll be up here with our organization on such and such day. We are prioritizing uplifting this policy for you. We love our opportunity to meet with the member. Usually when we do get those dates and we go in, um, we kind of get ourselves together. Everybody usually has a role. Everybody understands their role. And with that said, I can kind of just break down the roles that you will see played out in this mock view. We will have Sandra Suarez, who's with Jesse Place. We'll have Porsche Taylor, who's FTIO. And we will have, hold on, I'm missing one. Somebody else is going to be in here. Oh, Christina Brown. She's looking at me looking. How dare I forget you, huh? They will, of course, they will be playing the role of advocates. And as an advocate, usually the majority of what you're trying to do is get the information of the policy that you're trying to convince this member to support. You're trying to give them the facts that they need for this bill. So sometimes you'll split up, the facts that maybe you're more passionate or more pertinent about, or that you're more capable of, being elaborate about. And then, of course, you'll have someone who's responsible for telling a personal story. A lot of people don't realize how important having that personal story and how personable it makes. I've learned over the time in doing this that sometimes a person's personal story and testimony that ties in with the policy that you're trying to affect can be way more powerful than any fact that you can actually present this office. So of course you'll always have maybe a person or two who's actually going to sit there and give that story, and Danny's going to play that position in that part in telling that story. Usually you'll also have a note taker, someone who's responsible for taking notes, documenting the flow of the visit. Right now we won't have anyone playing that role, but yeah, and then sometimes we'll have our closer. Sometimes our closer would be the person that, that's the lead advocate, that began the introduction at the beginning. Get the closer is the person, like Eric was saying earlier, is going to, ascertain as to whether can we count on you, the member, or can we count on the member himself if you're asking the staff to support the bill when it comes to the floor. Will they support the bill when it comes to whatever committee it may be coming across? And then, of course, you have the member who I'm going to play. I'm going to play the member. So I guess we can jump it off. I'm ready when y'all ready. Because I ain't got to do nothing but sit here and just ask y'all hard questions and make y'all think when y'all finish. So.
Thank you, Lawrence, for your introduction. Thank you, Eric. We appreciate it. Again, my name is Sandra Suarez, and we are going to start. Usually we do the introductions when we go into a ledge meeting. We introduce ourselves, and in this case, Lawrence will be our senator. And all of us will go through the two bills that we're going to be speaking about today. We're going to start off. We'll do it brief since we're doing it correct, right? So my name is Sandra Suarez. I'm introducing myself to the senator. I'm the executive director of Justice Place Organization, She, Her, and AOUON, and I will popcorn it to Porsche. Thank you.
Good evening, Senator Cox. My name is Portia Taylor. I'm the founder and executive director of Prison from the Inside Out, Inc. Thank you so much for having us here this evening. I'm going to pass it over to Christina Brown.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Senator Cox. We appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today. I am Christina Brown, and I am with the Place for Grace. I am also going to pass this over to Danny.
Good evening, Senator Cox. I'm Danny Gray, and I am impacted by these two bills, so I will share a story. Thank you.
Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to sit here and listen to the information that you guys have. available for me. And of course, I'm Senator Cox. You guys know my name, but just you guys introduce yourselves. I'm going to introduce myself as well. I'm Senator Cox. I am the Senate member over 18th District.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. So we are here wanting to speak to you about two of the bills that we're currently in legislation. The first one that we'll be talking about is AB 2959, which is the venting bill championing by Liz Ortega, Assemblymember Liz Ortega. The summary of this bill aims to reduce and regulate food prices in California corrections and rehabilitations throughout the state of California, visiting rooms, and require CDCR to renew and expand vendor contracts to include healthy options as well as offer diverse foods choices in prison vending machines. This bill enhances fairness, affordability, quality, and dignity for families of incarcerated individuals. So you'll hear us, speak to you about what we currently go through, what the families go through, and the high cost of the vending food prices, the quality issues that are in those machines at times. And overall, we're seeking fairness across the board throughout the 32 prisons across California. So I will be brief in my responses or in this conversation just to give a chance to my colleagues. So I'll pass it over to Porsche. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. As Sandra mentioned to you, AB 2959 is very important in the state of California. We see family members who go see their loved ones who are incarcerated, and they're spending up to $435 per week, $70 for adults, and then their hotel stays, and then their round trip fees and gas. And as a state in the previous years, what we've been doing is cutting the cost for families. When a person goes to prison and or jail, their family shouldn't be held accountable via their finances. And so AB 2959 is basically just following the flow of what we've been doing over the years in the state of California by trying to cut the cost of holding families accountable when they have an incarcerated loved one. This also, again, would build family bonds, which we know is important to rehabilitation. And it would build those family bonds because a person that has a loved one incarcerated would not have to make the decision of, should I pay this bill or will I be able to go have an enjoyable visit with my husband, brother, daughter, grandchild, or whoever their loved one is. And just like Sandra said, I will keep myself short and pass it over to my colleague, Christina Brown Mendoza.
AB 2959 is such an important bill. Usually when someone becomes incarcerated, it now puts that family to a single income household. So this creates further gaps between the families and their loved ones who are currently incarcerated, which is visiting. And visiting is to help build the bonds of rehabilitation and reduce recidivism rates. I can often compare a visit as going to the movie theaters because the pricing of the food in the vending machine is the same thing as going to the movie theaters. Yet we go to the movie theaters to be entertained. We are not going to a prison to be entertained. We are going there to spend time with our incarcerated loved ones. We really urge you to have a vote for AB 2959, but I also want to pass this over to Danny, who is going to share a personal story.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you again. I'm Danny Gray, and I am here today as the wife of Marlon Gray, who is currently incarcerated at Centinela State Prison. Over the course of our 16-year marriage, my children and I have visited him at various institutions, and each visit entails significant financial strain. Our routine involves purchasing snacks, drinks, and food items from vending machines during our visits. Our daughter spends $8 on drinks. Our son initially spends minimum $10 on snacks, and I typically spend the most at $36 on hot items. By 9:30 a.m., we've already spent $54. And as the day progresses, additional vending machine visits add another $10 to $20. By the end of the visit, we incur a minimum cost of $80, excluding gas and lodging expenses at the nearest Best Western. Sharing meals as a family during our limited visiting time is paramount, and the current cost having restricted us of visiting only once a week. If the prices of vending machines items were comparable to local grocery stores, currently priced at $4.50 for similar microwavable items, it would alleviate our financial burden, allowing us to visit Marlin on an additional day. The passage of Bill AB 2959 would significantly benefit families like ours, reducing the financial strain associated with visits, thereby enabling more frequent visits. Significance of these visits is critical, especially as Marlin actively participates in positive programming and remains an essential presence in our children's lives. While facing a life sentence without parole is not easy, Marlin continues to contribute positively both inside and outside the institutional walls. AB 2709 is crucial for us as it ensures the value of our visits remains intact, strengthening our family bonds. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to the authors of AB 2959, Assemblymember Ortega, and AB 2709, Assemblymember Bonta, for recognizing the importance of visiting and addressing the financial barriers associated with vending machine cost. I humbly request your support for these bills by casting a yes vote, as they hold the key to preserving the vital connections with families like mine. Thank you for your time.
That was deep. That was deep. I have a question for you guys. This bill seems to be similar to the bill that was ran last year for canteen. Was there a reason that prices in the vending machine were left off, or was that intentional, or?
What was your question?
I noticed that this bill is similar to the bill that was ran last year that lowered the canteen prices. I was just wondering, why wasn't this, I agree with what you guys trying to do, but why wasn't this a part of that bill last year? Do any of us know if that was intentional, or if it just happened to slip through the cracks, or was the author just unwilling to add that on?
Um, I am not going to say that it was intentional, and all of my colleagues who are on the call, please feel free to step in. What I would say is that I believe as a coalition, we believe in stepping stones, and we wanted to be very gracious and thoughtful about how we draft these proposals and making sure that community is involved with the proposals. And so in bringing forth these new conditions, it wasn't that they were not there in the years prior. We just wanted to make sure the issues that were more pressing were addressed first.
I get you. Well, I'm completely in agreement with what you guys are presenting. Christina, I think you was going to say something.
Yes, I'm so sorry. If I may just piggyback off of what Porsche said. Also, since COVID has happened, we have seen a drastic increase in the cost of vending, where it was still unreasonable, but they were more reasonable prior to that. So as the years progressed, the vending machine prices have progressed. As we were able to get more money to bring in, the vendors then took that in turn and increased the pricing of their food, because the family members were now allowed to bring in a higher amount of money, where before it was very limited. So as we get an inch, then they take a mile. And that's what keeps on happening with these systematic increases. And so at the time, as Porsche said, we were prioritizing more pressing matters at that time last year. But this is an increasing problem, and we need it to stop now.
Got you.
Are there any other questions from you, Senator Cox?
No, I'm kind of interested in another bill that you guys have for me too. This one for sure. You can count on me, giving an aye vote when it comes before us.
Sounds good. Thank you. Sandra, do you want to go ahead and kick us off on our next bill?
Yes, thank you, Senator Cox. And So our next bill that we're going to be talking about is AB 2709, known as the last couple of other years, we brought forward the family visiting bill. So this year, there has been some modifications or language changes to the family visiting bill. And this is also by Assembly Member Mia Banta. This bill will ensure that personal visits are offered to individuals incarcerated in California state prisons and their families in a manner that facilitates strengthening and building bonds between incarcerated individuals, their families, and their communities. It will restrict institutional barriers that currently interfere with visiting by delineating the circumstances when institutional needs justify limiting or denying visits to an incarcerated person. It's very important. I know it probably sounds a little repetitive or that I'm reading through the script, but it's very important that we know the facts of this bill, that we're able to download our fact sheets to both bills so we can understand what the language that is in here. One of the biggest components, I believe that really hasn't been addressed too much in like social media or speaking about is the strip searches for the families, right? So this bill will also help protect women and children from being subjected to unwarranted, unnecessary, invasive, and degrading unclothed body searches before being allowed to visit their incarcerated loved ones. This is so very important for us as a community, as advocates, to protect our women, to protect the children as they go and they visit their loved ones. There's so many great components also to this bill. I have been reading it over and over to make sure that our facts are right. One of the, give me 1 second and I'll pass it over to Porsche. One of the most interesting also components of this bill is that it would give back the family visiting units to the families. You know, there are some facilities that are held. Some of the dogs are in some of the rooms. Some of the boxes are in other family visiting unit rooms. So this will actually help to give back those family visiting units to the families. You know, so that's something that I see very important. Amongst other components in this bill, I will go ahead and pass it over to Porsche. And thank you for your time, Senator Porsche.
Thank you. Sandra did amazing sharing all the facts. So I'm just going to share just the trinkets before I pass it on to my sis who will close us out. Definitely want to highlight something that this bill does because in my career, what I do is I go in prisons and I run programs. But as a young adult, I myself spent some time in jail. And so it's odd to me that I can literally cross the threshold of any prison as a staff or as a person that CDCR has hired to run programs. But while my husband was incarcerated, when I would apply to visit him, I would be denied every time, no questions asked, because of my record. My record was a misdemeanor. It happened when I was younger. And you know, considering I'm going into prisons now as my employer, like as my job, you would think that if I applied for a prison today, even after my husband is home, that I wouldn't run into this problem. But I do. I am denied every time I apply to go visit a person, a loved one of mine, in the California Department of Corrections, even though I work there. I'm there every other day. So this bill would prohibit the denial of visitors because of their law enforcement records when they do not have anything to do with a violation that is outside of visiting. And I think that's so huge, if not for the multiple reasons I listed myself, but because there are plenty more. No one should be denied a visit for something that has absolutely nothing to do with breaking a visiting rule. And then it would also require CDCR to provide a reason for the denials. A lot of times we see people get denied for these very vague things and there's no proof. And so a person is left to advocate for themselves, which could take months to years of them time away from them seeing their family members. So there's an accountability factor for CDCR, and there's no reason why they should be afraid to be accountable. And those two factors for me are extremely important. And I will go ahead and pass it over to Christine.
Thank you, ladies. Echoing what both of them has said, also this bill will prohibit CDCR from taking visitations away from our incarcerated loved ones when they receive a disciplinary write-up for misconduct that has nothing to do with visiting. As we know, visiting is the number one thing that reduces recidivism rates and helps bring and heal any traumas that have happened with the families that incarceration has left upon them. With that being said, it's the number one thing that gets taken away, regardless if you didn't move out of line and you received a write-up, you can lose your visits from seeing your family members. Or if you hug your child for too long, you can lose your visits for 90 days. This creating further traumatization and breaking apart families one by one. So this would require CDCR to take away something else, which they have plenty of things that they can take away. They can take away a hot plate, for heaven's sakes. You know, there's so many different things that they can take away to punish somebody who is currently incarcerated than to take away visits, which is the number one thing that brings healing to the families and reduces recidivism rates and makes it an all over safer environment for everybody. This also would prohibit CDCR for, well, I'm sorry, I don't want to echo that, how they can't just deny based solely off of the person's record. This would also require CDCR to do their own DOJ live scan of somebody's history rather than denying them because they missed something in 1989. You know, they got pulled over for a ticket where they didn't receive a misdemeanor or felony.
It was getting late, but you could go on a walk.
Sorry. Where you may have gotten pulled over, yet you weren't arrested, you didn't receive a ticket, but yet you were considered detained by the law and you forgot because it was 1989 and now you're in 2024 applying to see your son. So this would require them to go based off of that instead of someone's memory. Maybe it was just an accident that they missed it. I am going to pass this over to Danny so she can finish off what the rest of this bill would do.
Well, I already shared, thank you, Senator Cox, for your time, first of all. I've already shared a few stories, but visiting is so impactful for us, especially because our kids were raised in the visiting room. But having not any interruption, especially if it's not of his fault or anything that is out of our control, is crucial. Our son has autism, and his father figure is very important to him, and having that help him become a man and what he does today. And actually, he's doing very well with Marlon raising him inside, but we want to continue that with his growth. And I'm proud to say that he's doing well. He's a car salesman, but this is just to show you how impactful him being in his life is. And so I really would appreciate your support in these two bills. And thank you again.
This bill, I think it hits home a little bit more because I believe in rehabilitation. And lately, the legislative body, we have been prioritizing that if we do believe in true rehabilitation, then visiting, which facilitates building those bonds between families and between communities, should be at the forefront. And I still myself, for the life of me, can't imagine why our Department of Correction prioritizing taking one of the most important apparatuses for rehabilitation from an individual for things that don't happen within that visiting room or that don't happen that is a threat to anyone within the visiting room. It's mind-boggling to me that you don't take away AA, you don't take away NA, you don't take away Narcotics Anonymous, you don't take away school programs when someone has received an infraction, you know, or some type of reprimand for some type of behavioral issue while incarcerated. So why would our Department of Correction continue to prioritize taking away one of the most important, you know, apparatuses and mechanisms to rehabilitation still? So I'm completely in line with this bill. does. I was actually viewing um, the language a little bit before when you guys had sent this bill over, and it was something that set with me. I vaguely remember the bill from 958 last year when this coalition ran the bill, and I remember the uproar from CDCR about litigation efforts and that having some type of fiscal obligation, and I think it was just simply based off um, the bill last year mentioned the privilege versus the right. And I noticed that in this bill that you guys have removed any reference or attempt to secure the right for visiting, but instead focus and prioritize just removing any unnecessary and undesirable barriers that gets in the way of the visiting. And I think that was smart. Um, I love what you guys are doing. I also love I was speaking with Member Bonta on a few things. I didn't realize that this bill had the strip search component in it, but I do remember speaking with Bonta when you guys first had approached her about the standard um, that CDCR had recently changed that allowed them to, easily continue to target women and children for those invasive strip searches. And we talked about different things or different ways that we could have communications with CDCR. And I also believe there was an organization that was engaging in a lawsuit with CDCR because of these practices, et cetera. But I didn't know that this bill actually has that component in it. I think that's I applaud you guys for fighting and standing up for that effort and not only protecting, the visiting rights of individuals, but also trying to, protect the humanity and the dignity of these women and children who, like you all, are so passionate about not only visiting and keeping those bonds and relationships with your loved ones. I really applaud that. And for sure, I can see a lot of allies giving support to this bill. Um, and for sure, you can for sure count on my I vote for this bill.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. We really appreciate that. If you could share with your fellow senators and assembly men and women, we would greatly appreciate that.
Got it. And I guess that concludes our mock visit.
Yay.
I think we did great. I think we did great. We are pressed for time, but if people still want to stay on, we do have a question and answer session. I know there may be some questions that might be out there.
I've been following them. There's 5 running right now. And then, do you want to start questions now?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, do you want to read them to me, or I can kind of catch
Sure,
up with
I can
you?
read them because they're like separated. So let me scroll up and find them in the chat. Thank
I
you,
see. I
Angel.
see the
Angel
first
said you guys did wonderful.
one. Well, thank you, Andy.
Question number 1. How do you plan to ensure consistency with the efforts and progress made thus far in the advocacy work? And that is from Erica.
I can answer that one. Well, can't answer for everybody, but I'm pretty sure that you guys will probably be in line with me. Um, I think implementation is key. I think as not only at just getting a bill passed is one thing, but sometimes I think this year we have prioritized or focused on making sure that within our bill that we begin as we write our language, as we begin to move it through the legislative process, that we focus on what implementation would look like now. So when it comes to certain things that we need to put in the language that gives instructions and doesn't allow leeway for CDCR or any other agency to drag their feet or implement it in a way that's ineffective, we can catch that now and we can begin to give guiding language in the bill. For sure, for the times that for the bills that may have already passed, implementation is still key. I'll give an example: AB 1226. We've still, even though we've got that bill passed, immediately after we got it passed, me and a group of CFU members, we have been working with CDCR on trying to develop what implementation of that Keep Families Close bill would look like, trying to envision the hardships and trying to, create suggestions for CDCR and kind of checking their temperature and their pulse exactly on how they intended to roll this, the apparatus of implementing this bill out, the training that they were prioritizing or felt like they would have to give some of their staff members in order to, facilitate and accommodate requests to be, moved back and closer to their families. I think one way to also that we can remain consistent with our advocacy work is staying passionate about it, staying up and aware on what's going on, because as we take step forward, like this year shows us already in the policy world that the moment that you stop paying attention, guess what? They're crafting bills to take bills back. They're crafting bills to take steps back from bills that we've in the advocacy community have worked so hard to get, and just simply Prop 57, Prop 47. Um, they're trying to attack that bill each and every way they can. They're trying to make sure that they reinstate, tough on crime measures that we've already proven that's ineffective. But when we don't continue to fight and we don't have that on our radar, we don't pay attention, it's easier for them to do that. So we do in the advocacy world. It's so many different organizations and coalitions. We focus on bad bills as well. Some of our organizations, we have individuals dedicated in our teams to focus on specific bills that we know are harmful to our population, harmful to the demographic that we serve. Hopefully that answers the question. I want to take too long on that question. You got another one, of course.
Okay, let me go to the next question. It is from Mr. Breckenridge. He says, how do media support and how does media support and sometimes, I think the question is, how does media support undermine our efforts to get the bills passed? That's the question.
That's a great question. We know how powerful social media is. We know how powerful our media agency is, especially when we look at what media is really supposed to be about. And for sure, when there's misinformation, when you have individuals or you have publications that prioritize putting things out solely for views or solely because they're they're misaligned with what our goals might be, that's sometimes when you find the most problematic issues. Sometimes it's individuals who are misinformed too. So like you can simply sit there and like either of these bills that we've ever pushed in CFU, you can simply have someone that is high notoriety or someone that people trust, and they say something about a bill, and now it's everywhere, it's spreading around, and for sure that they're spreading false narratives. So now you have people chiming in and commenting, oh well, they don't agree with this, so now they don't want to support the bill, and they're telling other people not to support the bill. And that's very dangerous, because when you have a bill that's really prioritizing, that's uplifting system impacted individuals, where you are trying to remove all type of barriers for entities that want to separate you from your loved ones and destroy your home and your community. Instead, you are helping that agency sometimes when you're prioritizing putting out there misleading things, or when you prioritize um, posting or uplifting things that's not true. Now, sometimes that comes from intentionality. Sometimes that comes from a place of ignorance. It's one thing that I've learned, being system impacted. I spent 17 years behind the walls. And one thing that I've learned is don't listen to what everybody say. You go get your own understanding, your own comprehension, because we can be sitting here arguing about with each other about something and we ain't got a clue on what we arguing about or what's going on. But how dumb does that make us look? How stupid should I feel? And I've been there. I'll argue up and down about something that I think I know and I ain't got a clue. So I think a lot of times that comes from misunderstanding. It comes from misrepresentation. So I know those are some of the biggest ways that media could be a hindrance to our bills or misleading. But I mean, we all know those are tactics that the political arena has always used intentionally. A lot of times, what we're doing, we may not find it happening too often, and it's intentional. Not saying that it doesn't, but a lot of times it's because of misinformation. It's because of I heard this, and it's because some people, law and legal jargon is a bit technical. It's a bit difficult to understand. So sometimes if you don't have the right person to break down to you exactly what the language means, especially someone who actually sits in these rooms and sit there and craft these languages. If you don't have those individuals at your disposal, sometimes it's difficult for you to understand what's going on. So I won't just blame it on intentional bad actors. I would also blame it on just a lack of understanding. Like, lawyers go to school for a reason. So um, I'm gonna get long-winded. You're going to have to give me another question for us.
That was a good answer. I am gonna go to our third question, and the questions are coming fast. Let's popcorn some of these. And Erica, for her second question, it says, how statistics are being integrated into this advocacy effort for the bill while ensuring they're not misused by vendors or others to oppose the bill? And is this bill intended to apply solely to prison settings, or will it also encompass county jails? So I think the first part, because there's like two separate questions. How are statistics and the facts and data that we're using being integrated into this advocacy effort for the proposal for the bill? And how are we ensuring that those same statistics are not being misused by vendors or others who are going to eventually oppose this bill?
That's a good question because speaking from direct experience with someone that works in our legend research group for CFU tirelessly with all the individuals that are in that group, some of the things that we are prioritizing is for sure is the facts and the numbers. The way that is this with the vending machine bill is different. Just to give you guys a brief overview, it was easy with because CDCR ran my bad. It's different than the canteen prices. CDCR ran canteen, so it was easy to prioritize language that targeted. Okay, CDCR, this is what you do and what you can't do, and this is what you're going to stop doing. With these vending machine prices, is way much more complex than that. You have entities that's been set up by federal establishments to have a purpose to provide a reasonable living for blind vendors. Of course, blind vendors actually have a monopoly over the vending machine contracts, but CDCR and these institutions have entered into contract agreements that BEP, which is called the Business Enterprise Board, is responsible for running the vending machine process in all institutions. They're responsible for establishing contracts with each institution and excuse me, vetting and procuring the vendors, and also making sure that the rules that are BEP are established by are followed by each institution. CDCR has signed over its rights to allow them to do that. So of course, prioritizing, grabbing research not only and data not only that shows the outrageous prices that are being charged by the vendors in comparison to the streets, but also trying to ascertain exactly what these vendors are reporting that they are making. We're currently attempting to make sure that this data is not misrepresented by trying to see if we can get an audit. That might take a little bit more time, but we're not giving up on that. We prioritize collecting the facts and collecting data that shows that a good living can be made by simply just charging half the prices. Some of the things that are being charged, you can have markups anywhere from 300 to 600%. So we're prioritizing doing the research now as we continue to rephrase this language and utilizing the data that we can get our hands on, especially the data that shows what the markets are outside for these same products that we are being sold inside the carceral system. Hopefully I answered that question effectively.
Anybody else on the panel want to answer this question or potentially the next one, just to bounce it around between us all? I can't see y'all, so I'm just gonna say that's a no.
I do think that Eric should answer the next question too, and then I would like to bubble off of him on it.
Absolutely, I'm definitely
On Mr. I don't
I think we all wanted to jump in on that one, huh?
Yes.
On the personal story part.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so we will go on to the next question from Mr. Breckenridge again. It says, why these politicians want personal stories over facts? Why do people need to expose their trauma to these politicians when the facts do not change? Wouldn't that defeat the purpose of politics? And because Eric answered in the chat, we are going to just shoot it straight to you, Eric. And then I think Christina said she wants to piggyback.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I kind of already answered in the chat, but the main thing that I was just trying to say is it's not like an either or, right? Like it's really important to have the data, have the hard facts, but it's really the personal stories that humanize it. And, I think it's really important to be strategic about this and touch people in the mind and in the heart, right? And I think that the heart is where the stories come in, and the data and the hard facts is really where you convince people in the mind. But one thing that I did note is that, like, it really varies depending on the legislator. There are some legislators that don't want to hear nothing about stories. They're like, what are the hard facts? And, it's important for us to be prepared for those folks. And then there are others who are more moved by the stories. And it's just like really good to understand that. But one like example, well, maybe not like a great example, but, I think that sometimes we think that the data is going to be the thing that convinces people, but like when you're just looking at numbers, like you might not actually realize the real impact of that. But if you bring a young person in and they share their story about how like this bill will allow them to be better connected to their father, and will support those relationships, people can make more sense of that, because these politicians are also fathers, daughters, sons, the whole nine. And I think that it's really important to just utilize both strategies with stories and the facts. So that's basically my piece, but I know that there's other folks that want to add on as well.
Thank you so much, Eric, for answering that. And I also want to share too, like, while I really value your question, a lot of us who are doing the footwork, we don't view it as exposing our trauma, yet sharing a part of our story and sharing our life and putting a face to the people who are having to go through these type of systematic issues and why we're fighting for systematic change. And it does get emotional. It really does, because this is, not only do you get nervous because you're going in, and we forget that they're also people. When they do the census, they count as one, we count as one. They are equal with us, and we forget that because they're in these places of power where they can make these changes to help us. And so it's a nerve-wracking situation, and then you're sharing about something that's near and dear to you because it affects you. But while sharing that and sharing the things that hurt you and have caused you harm and traumatized you, it's also healing. And the only way to heal is to really truly share about the things that have caused us trauma and caused us pain. And it does, like Eric said, some people don't want to hear a story. They don't care. They're like, yeah, great to meet you. Have a nice day. But then there's the other people where they're like, wow, I really resonated with that. And maybe they don't give you a right away or a yes or anything like that, but they have something to think about. They have a face to put to these bills. They have stories to put to them. They're like, man, that was deep. And so not only is that super impactful, but the healing that comes from sharing your story it's our testimony. It's literally our testimony. Each and every single one of us that are on here are system impacted. And that's why we fight so hard. And that's why we continue to push through and persevere through it, because it personally affects us and it has hurt us. And we're turning pain into purpose.
Danny, you want to respond? I think Danny had.
Yeah, I just wanted to share a few other things, because I do lobby visits as well for SB 94, which of course we all know didn't happen. But SB 94 really does resonate with my husband, because he is serving. And prior to talking to lobby and doing the Zooms, I really do take the time to see the history of who we're talking with, sharing my story and the impact. And I can tell by the body language that it does affect them. They do see us as humans. They do see the two kids that was raised in the visiting room. They do see us. And that's what's most important. But what's even more important to me is that they see my husband. They see that they're human. They see that they matter. And that's what's going to keep us going to these visits and continuing to fight and continuing to share. And it is a personal, that's my personal path for me, but I just wanted to share that. And so if you can share, and I look at it as an opportunity to share. I take it as an opportunity and I take it as a win. And whatever we can do to have these representatives take another look, even their head coming up, taking, oh my gosh, she's from Hawaii. Oh my God, her daughter plays water polo. It almost like they kind of take a look and say, wow, I think I'm going to remember this story. So stories make a big difference. And that's just my opinion.
Portia, you got something to add? If not, I want to clarify something.
Yeah, just real quick. I also just wanted to point out that as we were going through that mock hearing, because the entire time I've been like back and forth in the chat, the room was quiet. We said everything that we had to say, all those facts that we named. Not until Danny told her story did we get a reaction. And that's the same thing we're almost going for in the room. Yes, we want to spill those facts, but we do, as Eric said, we want to pull those heartstrings to a person whose heart has been affected, is going to remember story and remember to vote more than they're going to remember that I said I spent $435. Go ahead, Lawrence.
Just a little clarity. The members aren't prioritizing that us as advocates come in there and tell any type of story or expose any type of trauma. It's not something that they want. It's not something that they're looking for. This is a tool and a mechanism, not a tactic. It's a tool. It's a tool and a mechanism that we are utilizing to open the understanding of what the flawed policies that we do have in place now, what they are doing and how ineffective they are. A lot of times we make the mistake in thinking that every legislative member understands exactly what's going on. They know that these bills exist, or they know why, we're trying to change them, we make the mistake of thinking we know why we're trying to convince them. And sometimes, a good majority of times, these legislative members deal with so many different things, and just the criminal justice reform is just a small part of political advocacy that may come across their desks. There's so many different things that they have to deal with. It's impossible to expect them to know all of it. So I think it's more on us as advocates and organizers to present to them effectively the flaws. And of course, when you're presenting some flaws, we're humans. You have to give them the humanistic side. We're not droids. So I just want to shed light that they're not expecting us to give that. And we have to remember trauma for so long, of course, as it's being developed, has caused issues, has caused pain. Why not give somebody something back by allowing them to turn that trauma into something more powerful, something that can affect change, something that can change a mind, that can change a heart, something that can change a law and make it easier for somebody that's going to, or that is still going through some of the things that we are advocating change for. And Portia, there's a question that I want to answer. It says questions concerning AB 2709
That's
fact sheet.
no.
That's
Yeah,
what you was about to
that's
say.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here.
We
Questions
here.
concerning AB 2709 fact sheet. AB 2709 will not reinstate the right to personal visits. Does this mean that people who already lost their family visits for a certain amount of time due to conduct unrelated to visiting will not get their family visits reinstated if this bill passes? I'm a little confused because the first bullet point contradicts that by saying prohibiting denial of visits as a discipline for conduct unrelated to visiting. Let me just point out the last part of that. That first bullet point, prohibiting denial of visits as discipline for conduct unrelated to visiting, does not say or does not state or does not give any type of direction or guidance that a person who received their visits or had their visits taken for any other reason would not have their visits restated if this bill passed. Okay, maybe I said it too complicated. Let me back up. When the right of visiting was a privilege, was a right, CDCR was very cautious on the reasons and the mechanisms that they utilize to infringe on visits, including simply denying and terminating visits during a visit. Once that bill changed, the bill came about and changed, CDCR was it was easier for CDCR to utilize their discretion to find minor ways to infringe on and create barriers for visiting, i.e., without it being a right, they could take the visits and do whatever they want to because of whatever punitive measures they decided they wanted to do them for. And that's because there was no law that said they can't. Now, simply removing the right is one thing, but when you phrase law in language that specifically points and attacks various actions by CDCR and makes it illegal, it acts the same as sometimes reinstating the right to privilege. And I have to remind you guys, when you're looking at fact sheets aren't what the ledge council are having. Fact sheets is not what's going to be on that digest page. Fact sheets is not what's determining or writing the law. Fact sheets is just a basic synopsis in layman terms so people can understand the more technical wording and the more technical law that is actually being passed. So sometimes you'll have things that is missing. But I know I'm taking forever to answer your question. I'm sorry. But this bill, for sure, is requesting retroactivity. So if a person, this is number one y'all worried about, so I'm just gonna give it to you. So if a person got caught on the yard with a cell phone, guess what? It would make it illegal for CDCR to take a person's visit. And yes, this bill would make it, if a person did get their visits taken for that or anything else outside the visiting room, it does mandate that CDCR return those visits to an individual. So yes, you will be able to get your family visits back if this bill does pass. And of course, CDCR may try to rebut against that, but our answer and response is, if we prioritize rehabilitation and reducing our recidivism rate and therefore increasing public safety, then we are going to remove every unnecessary barrier that gets in the way of visiting, which legislative believes now and researchers show is one of our number one apparatuses to achieving rehabilitation. So yes, to answer your question, sorry I'm so long and talk too damn much, but this bill would be retroactive. So if a visit got taken for anything that would happen outside from prison, outside that visiting wall, or that isn't a detriment to the safety and security of individuals while in that visiting room, then you can't take their visits no more, and you will get them back. Excuse me.
Thank you. That was a great answer and an educational and informative answer. The next question comes from Denise. And it says, sorry, my printer is printing in the background. What ethical challenges has the coalition faced or could face related to collaboration with organizations who are opposed to introducing these new bills?
That's a deep one. What ethical challenges has your organization faced or could face related to collaboration with organizations opposed to introducing these new bills? I'd start off by saying this: everyone in Coalition for Family Unity, we're under binding contract and agreement on how we operate, but our ideologies and our ethic and our principles align and are, for the most part, dictated by our MOU. But CFU, usually when we run bills, we have people that support, but usually this is just CFU. So we can guarantee that all the orgs within CFU, that we won't have any ethical issues in that regards, because none of the orgs that are in this coalition will oppose anything that we are doing. Now let's take it to a broader arena. Now, if we happen to support or have people that support what we do or support a bill that we do, we all have our own opinions, but for the majority of the individuals and the orgs that work in the space that in criminal justice reform, we're like-minded and we're aligned. We don't agree on everything, but there are certain things that we don't always see eye to eye about. But when we put the greater cause in perspective, which is focusing on the demographic and the system impacted individuals, whether directly or indirectly, that we're trying to affect, and we are focusing and looking on the policy and if it makes it better for that demographic or if it makes it worse, it's easy for us to realign and avoid any tensions or any nonsense that are lasting. I'll say that. But in this policy world, in this organizing world, we're dealing with politics. We all know how messy politics is. We do come across individuals and people who want to be uplifted, and they don't necessarily prioritize or put up the work. They put up, look, I did this. This is me. Me and my organization did this. We want the credit, et cetera, et cetera. We do deal with people like that at times, but you can only be responsible for your own ethic code, your own moral fiber. Sometimes you can have people totally in line and in sync with the things you do, and then next thing you know, you turn around and they're supporting something that you know for sure is not going to help the demographic that we serve. But guess what? Our track record for our with us for our will speak for ourselves. I don't think necessarily we can be blamed or looked at any type of way because of someone that we may have aligned with before decides that they want to align or prioritize their morals and their focus elsewhere. Challenges do arise, and then it's just it's like I tell the coalition, we gotta like each other. So it's the same thing for if we dealing with people outside. What are we here for? What are we doing? What's our common goal? What's our motivation? As long as we align there, then guess what? We can put the rest of this aside and move forward with the vision of the work is. So um, hopefully that answers that question enough. Unless when you guys got something to answer, add to it.
We create MOUs between all the coalitions and every with the coalition, every organization has their say so and has their point person to go to too, as far as dismantling information, dispersing information. And we all, like, we're people and we're strong people, like Lawrence had said too in the beginning, and we're all strong people because of the work we're doing. And so we do lean on each other. And of course, we're human, so things can get misconstrued, but we communicate and we have those hard conversations, and we take accountability too when things get misconstrued. And that is what's really huge in this space, especially working with a bunch of strong people that are coming from different organizations. Because just like Lawrence said too, I'm going to echo it, is that we have the same mission in mind. Like, we're not enemies, we're teammates. And if someone doesn't like someone, so what? But everyone's going to respect each other in this space. And that's something that we all hold pretty near and dear to our hearts, is that, like, we're not going to allow people to disrespect our teammates, because we're the ones, like, we're doing the work. We're doing the work, and we're doing it for everybody, not just for one person. It's literally for everybody. And some of this work doesn't even affect some of us, but it will affect so many others. And that's what's really important to understand, is that it may not affect me, but it'll affect Porsche and Danny, or vice versa. And so I think that it's really important too, for those of you who are uplifting our community, that you uplift each one of our team members, because there's a lot of times where we become the target when we're just trying to do our jobs and just disseminate information and things like that, and the public doesn't necessarily know really what's going on behind closed doors, because they aren't sitting at the table writing these laws. So I think it's very important that before we jump in and we start saying different things, that we reevaluate and reach out and support the people who are working on the bills, because just know that they are aligned with the mission of helping our people.
All right, Christian, we got what, 2 minutes? Look, 30 minutes over, but I guess you can close the lobby day, March 11th.
Yes. So on to the fun stuff. I think we got, hold on. We got one more question in 2 minutes. Michelle, you kicked one out. How can people outside of the US get involved in lobbying or helping to push bills forward? I often see that we have to pick our sector, and she means our district, to see who our assembly member is when lobbying. Anybody want to take that? Because we have 2 minutes, a quick answer.
The quick answer is you could just join a Zoom call.
That. Yes.
Outside of the US.
So join us, join a Zoom call, let them know that you know the information on the bill. You don't have to be a constituent. Of course, it's more impactful, but you can definitely join a call and give those facts, share that you're in support, and, move on from there. You don't have to be a constituent to be involved. You're welcome. So before you guys get off the call, we are doing an in-person lobby day in Sacramento on March 11th. We need everyone to show up. It starts at 10 a.m. Please be there at 9:30, smiling and ready to go. For those people that can come, all our myself, Christina, Lawrence, quite a few of us will be there. You'll get sectioned off to come hang out with us, and we will do what you guys seen tonight in person. We'll have fact sheets for you all, so you'll be prepared. Don't be nervous. We're very supportive and friendly. Come out and hang with us so that we can get these bills passed. Location, does anyone throw out the location where we're meeting at? We're meeting on what side of the Capitol?
Aren't we meeting in Labu on across from the swing space? What's that?
We will drop on social media where we're meeting at. There's the cleanup event.
Or we just meet on L Street. We just meet on L Street, right? Oh, sorry. L Street.
It will be in the Coalition for Family Unities group.
All right,
Thank
we
you.
appreciate
And
you
then on
guys
all of
showing
our
up.
pages. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you. The questions were amazing. Have a blessed night.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you for sharing space. Looking forward to seeing everybody Monday.
Thank you.
We'll be in your office on Monday too, Jose.
Where's Neva? She was Sandra's.
She could stay.
Yeah, I'm like, she's family.
Yeah. We're like, she's one of us.
Just kicking people out.
Yeah, she's one of us.
Hold on, let me go stop live streaming real quick.
So funny.
Let me stop. And, oh,